Welcome to the FounderVille.vc podcast. This is where we love to talk to founders, to entrepreneurs, to investors, and heck, just anybody that loves supporting entrepreneurship. So my name's Shay Hauser. I'm here with my good partner, Scott Millwood. And today we have a special guest, the factory whisperer, Miss Didi Caldwell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
We're fired up to have you. So Didi and I go back about 18 months. It's been an amazing journey, learning about your consulting business, learning about global location strategies, which is growing like crazy, as I can tell, and then doing work together on Strata Platforms, we'll talk about in a little while too. So maybe first, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background. I mean, another Clemson graduate, then went to Carolina.
That's right.
But then went to Carolina. And then a lengthy career at Fluor Daniel doing an architecture background and a lot of different things that ultimately led to the creation of your business of global location strategies. So we'd love to hear a little bit about that. If you
How did the factory whisperer become the factory whisperer?
Yes.
Very good question. I had this grand plan when I was in my teenage years.
You too. Huh?
No, it didn't happen that way at all. I did go to Clemson. I studied architecture. And pretty soon I figured that maybe it wasn't the long-term career for me. So I always had this idea that I was going to go back to the University of South Carolina and do my international MBA. At that time it was called Masters in International Business. And so after working in some commercial and residential design build work, I ended up going back to USC. And at that time, they required that you do a foreign language, which mine is Spanish, and we had to do an internship in a country that speaks that language. So I got an internship with Fluor Daniel. This is 1997. It was Fluor Daniel at the time. It's now Fluor, but Fluor was flying high. It was, when they interviewed me, the stock was trading at like $72 a share, and by the time I got there in July, it was at $28. When I left the office in December of that year, it was the country manager, his assistant, and me. And
Wow.
I left the two of them there, and it was trading below 20.
Eesh.
So it was a great lesson in what it's like to work in a corporate world.
Yeah.
But I had a chance meeting there. So Ed McCallum, who was also from Greenville, he was in the site selection group, worked for one of the pioneers in this industry called Bill Dorsey. And when he got there, he was telling me about what he was doing. He was in Argentina to work on a feasibility study for a copper smelter project. And I was helping him with some market research because I didn't have a lot to do. So I started asking him questions. And the more he told me about this, that he gets to fly around all over the world, talking with executives in the C-suite, helping them determine where they're going to build these very large manufacturing projects. And it just sounded like the absolute dream job for me. And so I begged him to hire me, and he did. And so after spending some time in the marketing coordinator role in Argentina, and I came back to Greenville. My parents are originally from here. I never lived here, but I got here as soon as I could. And I went to work in the site selection group. And I was there for until 1994, then left and did a couple other things, capital advisory work, and ended up buying a company that I was managing. It was just sort of fortuitous, not so fortuitous for the business because the Supreme Court, or actually it was the South Carolina legislature, passed some legislation that made our business model obsolete.
Wow. Geez.
It was funding, doing capital advisory work for K-12 school districts using installment purchase financing. So about $1 billion in Greenville County and about another $1 billion throughout the state. And with one stroke of the pen, they made that model go away.
Jeez.
So we still had some construction projects that we were monitoring. So I went to the owners and said, why don't you let me buy the business and I'll pay you out of these future revenues. And then I can pursue things that meet my hurdles for return on investment, but maybe aren't that interesting for you. And then I can't decide if it was delight or horror that when they said yes. Okay, that sounds like a great idea. So I did have some revenue coming in for about 24 months. It would sort of sustain me while I was trying to find my way. And I didn't think I wanted to go back into site selection. I was newly divorced. I had 2 very small children, and I thought, this is just, it's just bad to do something that you have to travel all the time. Mm-hmm. But it was 2008, and there were a couple of really good projects that walked in the door, and I said, well, you know, I must be good at this because people are willing to pay me and I have mouths to feed. So this is what I'm going to do. And I haven't really looked back since then. So I actually acquired that company and then just rebranded it Global Location Strategies, which is what the internal group at Fluor was previously called.
Okay.
And Fluor ended up outsourcing all of that work to my company. And I had a partner at that time, John Sisson, and we had worked together at Fluor, and it was amazing. Nice. So they ended up outsourcing all of that to me, and we were able to take advantage of that long history and all of the work that had been done previously in order to catapult us into this. But it was 2009 at that time.
Yeah.
And we had one or two projects that without them, I'd probably be working for someone else at this point. I don't think I would have been able to sustain just enough.
Yeah.
Yes,
nice.
Just enough. And from there, we started to build. We hired our first person intern from Furman. He ended up coming on to work full time. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, we were about 6 or 7 people, and we're just over 20 now. And we have an office in the Netherlands. We have a presence in Latin America, in Panama and in Colombia. And then we have people that are throughout the U.S., but most of the headquarters is here in Greenville, South Carolina.
Nice. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because we were just talking with another Clemson grad that had a similar pathway, Capers, on having a vision to do something and finding something that he could buy. And you had the same thing. It wasn't perfect, but it was a starting point, right?
It was
a way to get in the door. What was the driver for you at that time, though, to say, I want to do this on my own. I think I want to be in charge of this thing, and I think I've got enough gumption to go get after it.
I never really had an inkling that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It was something that came to me later in life, and I think it was just that I hadn't been exposed to the idea. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was in the military. And my mom ended up becoming a bit of an entrepreneur later in life because she started an educational supply store. But it just wasn't something that I thought was
not in the family.
Not in the family, and not really I wasn't really even considering it. But I am very comfortable with risk. Maybe a little bit too comfortable.
I like that. That's good.
I can relate.
We need to drill into that. It's like more risk. Good.
Yes. And so I don't think I had really thought the whole thing through. I just it sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
We've got this work that we have to do. We've got this money coming in, and they can just continue to pay me, but it doesn't take me all this time to do it. So why don't I just buy the business and then figure out what I'm going to do?
So it felt a little bit more like just an opportunity.
It was just an opportunity.
It
was just an opportunity.
Not I'm going to do this because I've got it in me. It's just, this seems like a good thing. Yeah.
And I didn't really doubt that I could do it, but I had no business plan. It was just, I've got a while to figure it out, and I'm going to go do this. And I think it also helps if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a safety net. So what that may look like is that you have a spouse that has a good job with benefits.
Right.
It may also look like you have a family that is not going to let you fail. Yeah. And although I was already well into my 30s by this point, I knew that I'm an only child, and I knew that
I'm not going to be destitute.
I'm not going to be destitute.
Right.
My dad was not going to my mom and dad were not going to let me, sleep on the street corner and let my kids go hungry. Yeah. I never had to ask them for money, thankfully, and I'm happy about that. But I think in the back of my mind, knowing that I had that security, and that's one of the things I think is really important when we talk about building an entrepreneurial community, that it's really important to know that not everybody has that luxury.
Oh, no, right.
How many more entrepreneurs would we see if we were able to give them some type of a safety net?
It's the hardest thing. The hardest is, for a person in a regular job, career, to forego income for 6 months, a year,
years,
in many years, right? And maybe that's the probably the thing that shoots people's dreams down the most. Like, I've got this idea, I think I can go do it, but how do I make a living at it, right?
Yeah, and the people that are most able to do that tend to be in their 20s
Yeah.
or even younger. They don't
When you're least capable.
They don't have a mortgage.
Yes, right.
They can shack up in a house.
Right.
They don't have children to take over, but they don't have the experience.
Right.
Yes.
You got lots of energy, but
Lots of energy.
not a lot of experience and not a lot of connections.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, yeah, so that really helped me.
Yeah.
And I've, just never really looked back.
When you look back on some of the catalysts that help you to grow the business successfully and add people, were there any dark periods where you felt like, this is too tough. I'm going to throw in the towel, and this is not really working for me.
You mean today?
Yeah.
I mean, I have those periods every day.
That's good to know.
Yes.
Good to know. I was really thinking about that early days when you mentioned that you had enough runway there for a little while. Was there ever a point in time where you said, enough of this, I'm going to just go back and I'm going to get a job?
No.
No, it just worked. You knew it just worked.
No.
What would you attribute that to? Is that just tenacity? Is that hustle? What is that thing that kind of got you over that hump?
That's a great question. I don't really know. And I told you that I'm really comfortable with risk.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that makes me comfortable with risk is that I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, nice.
I tend to look at things as like, what's the best case scenario? And my husband is exactly the opposite. Like he is very risk averse. And so we are a good yin and yang in that respect. And so
well, I describe myself as a delusional optimist all the time.
Delusional, exactly.
I have to do mind tricks to tell myself that this is all going to work out. It's going to work out automatically.
It's kind of like having a baby. If you wait until the perfect time and you manage all the risk out, you'll never have a child.
Right.
Having a business is exactly the same way.
Yeah,
I mean, you just at some point you just have to make the
pull
leap.
the trigger, right?
And so I really am serious when I say that I have crisis of confidence on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And there are times when imposter syndrome is real.
It is real.
But, I give myself a few hours or a day to wallow around in that. And then the next day I get up, I put my big girl panties on and I'm like, all right, let's go do this.
Yeah.
You just gotta keep moving.
Yeah, keep moving.
I think that's a key part of it. Just got to keep pressing ahead no matter what happens. I mean, because certainly, throughout since 2020, especially given COVID, you've built this practice, right? And I'm sure there's times it's step forward, step back, 2 step forward, 1 step back. I mean, it hadn't been a straight line, or has it?
No, it has not.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of different partners, and partners can be great, and partners can be not so great. And those were hard times. And it just was.
You've got a great partner.
Yeah, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Those were just experiments, right? I mean, when you look back on them, it's like, well, let's try it. We think there's some chemistry here. This is maybe going to work out and be bigger than what we have going.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not all experiments should be taken. Maybe you should have like a lab experiment before you have like a real life experiment. Pilot stage.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is very difficult for businesses to manage and will sink you faster than anything is cash. Running out of cash.
Oh, yeah.
And there were plenty of times
Founders take note.
Yes.
Yes.
And there were plenty of times where I didn't take a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I paid it was more important for me to pay my people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, I had to put things on credit cards. I had, I remember, I can't remember, I think it might have been 2009 or 2010, where I had to I had made on paper a lot of money in 2009. And then when the tax bill came in 2010, I didn't really have the money because we had not had a good couple of quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just had to put my tax bill on my credent card.
Oof.
Got a lot of points.
I love that.
Got a lot of Delta points, let me tell you.
That is great.
Cash flows is
Making it
crucial.
happen.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of founders I know that we work with, first-time founders don't totally understand the concept of cash flow.
Yeah.
Just how cash flow works, setting aside the P&L and what that might look like, just how the cash needs to move around. And it's often a harsh lesson to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
When you just don't understand it.
That and paying taxes. right?
Yeah, taxes are tough too.
They have no sense of humor about
It's a
that.
good
They
problem.
don't.
Listen, paying taxes is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And yet it can still be
It
a
can-
problem.
It can
Yes.
right?
sting.
It can
Particularly
absolutely
for,
be
a
a problem.
successful business. All of a sudden, cash is like, well, do I pay people or do I pay Uncle Sam? He's not going to wait around. But
That's
neither
right.
are your employees.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you can't miss payroll. That's just
I think
one
that
doesn't work.
you cannot miss payroll. And so having a line of, sometimes it's just a timing thing.
Yeah.
So you just need a line of credit. Small Business Association is good at doing lines of credit where they can convert into a loan and that sort of thing. You just need that. I mean, obviously, you're going to be liable for it, if you aren't able to pay it back. But if you think of it as like a revolving credit, kind of like a credit card for your business, so that you can, in the lean times, like what if you have a big account and the receivable just doesn't come in?
Sure.
You still need to be able to make payroll.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And in a consulting business, that is
It will
that is a
happen.
constant
Yeah, it
it's a
will
constant
happen.
battle. You got
Yeah,
to stay on
right.
top of those receivables.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not recurring revenue. It could be huge receivables. It gets stretched out. I would imagine. Who knows what? 90
And
days.
I hate that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That was one of the big struggles that I had too. Is I just did not like the administrative side of running the business.
Yeah.
And so finding someone that would help me through that and manage that over the years, and obviously the needs that we have grown tremendously from when we were 3 people to now that we're 20 people. But that was absolutely critical because I am definitely I'm classic visionary. I've ADHD. Every time there's a squirrel, I'm looking to go and chase that bright shiny ball. So I need people. We implemented EOS about two years ago,
Awesome.
Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it was the most difficult thing I've ever done, including starting the business. And it was also the most valuable.
A lot of discipline.
A lot of discipline. Unfortunately, we had some turnover. Some of it was good. Some of it was, still painful.
Was it part of EOS or was it just concurrent with it?
I think it was a combination.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it makes accountability really clear, but it's also incredibly painful to go through. And sometimes if you have unresolved issues when you go into it, there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
And it can bring some, tensions up to the surface.
Right.
And so I lost at least one person that it just really stings.
Yeah.
Really, very painful. But if I look at the health of the business and where we are now, we are much better structured. We're more disciplined. And I think you get to a certain level of complexity in the size of the business. Like if you're 4 or 5 people, you don't need an operating system to help you communicate.
Right.
I mean,
Shouldn't.
I just walk next door and say, this is what we're doing. When you get to 10 and above, it just becomes so complex. And I had essentially everybody reporting to me. And so I was a bottleneck.
Yeah.
I couldn't make decisions. It was, I'm chaotic. And so EOS really helped put that structure together so that we now, instead of being more like a visionary-led company or a personality-led company, we are more of a process-led company.
Plans, process, rhythm, routine, right?
All the things I am not
Just don't
good at.
like.
Yeah.
But I have an integrator that does that for me,
Yeah.
and then I can do the things that really add value to the company.
EOS is fantastic, and I'm a big believer in it. There's a book called E-Myth that's very similar that was very instrumental in Michael Elliott and I kind of getting our brains together on viewing the business as a franchise and thinking of what would this business need to look like to an outsider if they wanted to buy it, if they needed to come in and run it, and I'm not there, Michael's not there. Could they run the business? Could the team run the business without us? Right?
Sure.
And I think EOS kind of helps you to be that, start to separate the power of the personality to run the business, which works when it's 8, 10 people, but you kind of outrun it after a while. It's like it's a big personality that can run 20 people, all reporting direct.
Oh, God,
right?
yeah.
Really, really difficult.
Yes,
So, yeah, congrats
very
on
difficult.
doing that. That's
Yeah.
a big decision.
Thank
Why
you.
did you go down that path? What was the driver? How did you get hooked on EOS? Were you sold on it in some way, or was it just a realization?
I either came across just randomly a couple of founders that had done it, or I had some friends that had used it in their organization, and I again, I didn't do a lot of homework. It just sounded like a great idea.
We're doing this. Yeah.
And everybody told me how hard it was going to be. And I was like, it can't be that hard.
I got this.
It I only saw the good things about it.
Right.
But it was one of those risks that I took, and I'm really glad that I did. And I think you really get the most out of it when you commit to it.
Yeah.
Like, I think there are companies that kind of, we kind of do EOS.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're going to kind of get the benefits.
Right.
I'm going to the EOS annual conference next week up in National Harbor in Maryland. And it's just so it's a big production, but there are such great content. So I'm really looking forward to it. Because for so long I was just so consumed with, location strategy and how do I become better in that? And so I was mingling a lot with my peers in this industry. And there's only so much you can learn.
Right.
But for competitive reasons, they're just not going to tell you everything, and you're not going to tell them everything. But also, this is a fairly small industry, and so I want to find other professional services and entities that I can emulate that maybe have made a big jump in terms of size or revenue or being able to do really cool things. So EOS gives me the opportunity to do that.
That sort of parallels, deciding to work on the business, not just in the business, right? Working in the business every day is just doing the stuff, but working on the business, you kind of put a different hat on altogether and sort of design with intent. Where is it going to go?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of good opportunity and risk-taking, your appetite there, tell us a little bit about software and how you came to champion a new entity.
Well, if I never saw myself as an entrepreneur, I surely never saw myself as a tech entrepreneur. But there were a few things that we did, decisions that I made back around 2015 or so that I think really changed our business. One of them was that I really invested in branding. I hadn't really paid that much attention to it. Branding and marketing, kind of with a capital M. I hired a full-time business development person who is now at Strata Platforms, Susan Donkers. We formed some partnership relationships and looked at the way we structured some of our compensation. And then the fourth thing is we decided to make this leap into software development. And what started as just like a kernel of an idea eventually grew into what is now Strata Platforms. And it was so frustrating to me. The site selection group at Daniel Construction, which preceded Floor Daniel, goes back to the early 70s. And I have copies of some of the reports that they did. And except for the fact that they were typed on a typewriter and they had a adding machine tape attached to them when they were calculating the cost, the methodology really hasn't changed that much.
Fascinating.
And so we've used technology in this business in order to speed things up. Like, obviously, we do things in Excel. We use email. I mean, I used to get huge boxes of these RFPs from different communities, and we would have a war room, and we would set out everything. But unlike maybe, say, streaming or unlike home buying or vacation rentals, it has not been transformed. And I was stuck gathering data from multiple different places, collecting it, copying and pasting it into multiple analytical models in order to arrive at a recommendation for my clients.
Sure.
And every time one piece of data changed, because as you go through the process, you learn more, then you have to go back and you have to touch it over and over and over again. So we started out by just looking for, Susan was very, very instrumental in this. We started out looking for something that was off the shelf. And we tried things like Qualtrics to try to get the data, but it wasn't really designed to accommodate the existing infrastructure of economic development and the way economic developers and site selection consultants work together. So that was a bit of a bust. We really just couldn't find it. I thought surely it's similar to Kepner-Trigo, so surely Kepner-Trigo has some kind of a model. No. I mean, they had Excel models, but nothing automated. And so we just started dabbling in it and like, well, what if we created our own software? And we had a false start with a company out of Ireland where we spent a lot of time sort of designing what we wanted this to look like. And we ended up parting ways. And it didn't really cost that much money, but it cost a lot of time.
Yeah. And
then met up with Andy Kurtz here at Copus in Greenville. And we just said, let's just create one little model, just one thing. Just do the scoring, weighted scoring, comparative analysis. Once we do that, okay, now let's build the financial analysis and the charting. And it just grew and grew from that.
Nice.
And then we also teamed with a company in Kansas City, Evergy, which is a regulated utility. They already had a site database that they were using, similar to like a Zillow or an Airbnb, that they would sell to economic development organizations in order to showcase their sites and buildings on their own website. And we worked with them to build this RFI software, which has all kinds of wonderful features that facilitate the collaboration between site searchers, like companies and brokers and site selection consultants, and site marketers, which could also be brokers, but is also economic development organizations, railroads, utilities, developers. And by facilitating that process, we're able to collect this data that cannot be gotten anywhere else. There is no AI model that can go out and get that information because it either resides in somebody's brain or in somebody's hard drive.
Wow.
Or the cloud, but it's their own personal cloud. So, and then once you collect that information, then you've got your analytical models set up such that it will transfer seamlessly, eliminate any of the properties or locations that you're considering that don't meet the minimum criteria, and then give you a weighted comparative score relative to the cost. And so you can very, very quickly go from 100 potential locations down to, 20 or 30. And based on which ones offer a high quality, low cost solution.
Yeah.
And then you spend your time on those 20 or 30.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, it requires a human to go and piece through that, make sure all the data, you have to have lots of conversations, you have to go and visit the site, you need to know what the business culture is like. Do they even want this project?
But you squeeze the quantitative analytical aspect down to less time and energy so that you can essentially expand the qualitative time, right?
That's right.
That's kind of the goal.
Well, and for other site selectors, or for your business, it creates that efficiency to actually take on additional business and clients. I think it's one of the ways you've grown the business.
That's right.
Utilizing technology in a way that others have not versus Excel and cut and paste. Yeah, it's this engine that is driving efficiency that's opened the door for we can take on 4 more projects this year. I've always thought that's been fascinating as I've learned about your business.
Automation of the factory whisperer.
That's
right.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's been very cool.
We estimate on a typical project, it takes out about 200 to 400 hours worth of work.
Wow.
Just the efficiencies associated
with
it. The people that work with me now a lot of them are relatively new to the business. They have no idea what it's like to do these projects without the software. And I have said it 100 times that if you told me all of a sudden that we had to do it without the software, I would close up shop and I would go to the beach. I would just never want to do that ever again.
Too hard.
It's too hard.
Too much wasted time and energy. So in that, do you worry that the secret automation of the factory whisperer process goes to competitors or is loose in the world in some way, shape, or form?
From the time I started building it, I sort of knew that I wasn't going to keep this to myself.
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons for that. One, I just really feel like that the tools themselves are better when more people are using them. So when there are more sites in there, there's more data. Right. It just kind of builds on itself. And even though, some of my senior leadership staff, they're like, I'm not so sure that I want, all of our competitors to be able to use this. The reality is, there are companies out there that are competitors with Microsoft, but they use Excel.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? Right.
Right.
The secret sauce of being a site selection consultant is based on the thoroughness with which you do the job, the experience that you bring, the creativity that you bring.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is just stuff that machines can do.
Yeah.
And that's what we're setting it up to do.
You can give them the recipe. You can't make them a great chef.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly right.
Selling the recipe is okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that you give them the ingredients.
Ingredients, okay. Yeah.
You give them the ingredients, and maybe they know they're trying to make a souffle.
Yeah.
But everybody's got their own recipe of exactly how they want it to turn out, and some turn out better than others. So
nice.
I just have never been afraid of, it's like I feel like I was in some ways Napster. I just created the – you can't fight it. You might as well go ahead and go with it.
Go all the way in.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's been the biggest learning or the biggest surprise of being in the software business now, having an application that's out in the wild?
That you can't just snap your fingers and make it happen.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
A lot of building.
A lot of building. And I feel like sometimes it's like, well, we'd like to have this feature. Well, we'll put that in the queue.
Yeah.
And I'm not very patient. So that's I can see the vision. I should say that we spun off, thanks to Founderville for helping support us there. But we spun off Strata Platforms into its own company in January of 2024, which was last year, a little over a year ago. So I'm not in the day-to-day business.
Yeah.
I'm still a majority shareholder. I'm still very active in, helping them be a thought partner. But one of the things that was really important was for the site selection and economic development industry know that this is not Didi's. Mm-hmm. This is not Didi's product. I don't have any access whatsoever to their projects and their data. This is completely separate for them. So I didn't want them to too heavily identify that with me. And I have other things to do. I mean, my consulting business is, growing and profitable, and I need to that my highest and best use right now is focused on continuing to grow that and let the professional leadership that we brought in to lead Strata, let them carry the water there.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well said, for sure.
And it's hard in a way to let go.
Yeah.
Because it is in some ways my baby. But I found other things to focus my attention on. Yeah. There's no shortage of those things.
Yeah.
When you're building a practice like you are, there's going to be plenty going on.
And it's working so far.
I would say that we are also beneficiaries of a very active market. I mean, it started ramping up. When I first started doing this in 1998, manufacturing projects in the United States were few and far between, and they tended to be smaller. So I spent about the first 10 to 15 years of my career mainly doing projects outside of the United States.
Wow, interesting.
And that really started reversing, I would say, around 2010 and then accelerated through 2013. I think a lot of that had to do with there's a multitude of things, but the one thing that I could really point to for my business, which tends to be very capital-intensive, energy-intensive projects, is the shale revolution. And so the United States went from being a net energy importer to being a net energy exporter. And that makes electricity relative to the rest of the world cheaper here, more plentiful here. It makes natural gas very cheap and plentiful. And for some of the projects that I work on, natural gas is the feedstock. So if you think of like an ethane cracker or a methanol plant. But in other cases, it's used for fuel, so for heat. And that really changed the dynamic. So we're still not going to compete with places like Mexico or other places in Asia for labor-intensive projects. Yeah. But where we really excel is in these capital-intensive projects. I mean, we didn't work this project, but Hyundai Steel just announced a $6 billion project in Ascension Parish. We did I can't remember how many billion. They start to run together after a while, but we did a big hydrogen and blue ammonia facility for CF and Mitsui in Ascension Parish. They're actually using natural gas as the feedstock to make the hydrogen. We did Novelis, a $4 billion aluminum rolling mill in Baldwin County, Alabama. It's the first aluminum rolling mill that's been built in the United States since 1980.
That's crazy.
And so
fascinating.
It's really just ramped up. And then we've got the data centers, the batteries, obviously the Inflation Reduction Act, and focused on all of these green industries. That put a lot of money into the market. So I and all of my frenemies,
Yeah.
have really benefited from that frothiness in the market.
And it should continue. I mean, there's no reason not to believe it's just getting started, right?
Between the pandemic and the desire to onshore manufacturing for supply chain integrity and now tariffs to incentivize manufacturing here, it should be a continuous
should be a great
flow.
market.
I think that the supply chain security is a big deal, but I think companies are taking a little bit more of a hemispheric type of look. So instead of having, your labor-intensive production being located in Asia, which is a really long way away, you might put it in Mexico or Central America and put the capital-intensive things here. So I think that was definitely a part. Energy, I think, still is the biggest reason that you would want to. The other thing is our market. So the demographics in other places around the world and the economy is not doing nearly as well as in North America. Yeah. So demographics definitely supports that. I talked about the IRA already, which was like throwing kerosene on the fire. I actually think the tariffs are dangerous because, you don't cite an automotive OEM plant, original equipment manufacturer like BMW, in a year.
Right.
No,
it takes
5, 6,
it takes
7 years,
4, 5, 6 years. And then to realign the supply chains that we have associated with Mexico and Canada and other places around the world, that will take at least a decade.
Right.
So I think it could actually reduce manufacturing jobs in the United States in the short term.
Yeah.
And I don't know about in the long term. But I do know that the short-term pain is something that I'm very
and you don't
concerned
know how long
about.
These things
it's
stay.
going to last.
What's permanent, right? It's permanent until the next election. It may not last.
Or next week.
Or next week. Capriciousness.
For sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
We can't quite decide. And I think the uncertainty around the tariffs is as bad as the tariffs themselves because that's the other thing that companies just don't like. I mean, if you're going to invest $1 billion somewhere, you want to know what the rules of the game are.
Yeah, I would want a little confidence.
And they make decisions for the long term. When you build a $4 billion aluminum rolling mill in 2060, that thing is still going to be running.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they're concerned about what's going on right now, but they really want to know that they're going to continue to be profitable and there's going to be a market for their industry well into the future.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Fascinating.
This has been fantastic.
Sure has.
Thank
Didi,
you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. The Factory Whisperer, named by Bloomberg.
Yes.
I'm going to have to dig that up and check that out.
Yeah, that was a very serendipitous
That's pretty awesome.
meeting. Yeah.
Pretty awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming out. We sure do appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Yes, likewise.
Thanks for all the efforts and work with us at Strata. We certainly appreciate that. And you were the creation of that idea, and we're happy to be a part of it for sure.
Yes, and thank you so much for your support.
Absolutely. All right, so that wraps up the Founderville.vc podcast. We hope you found a little nugget of great information you can take with you, and hope you have a great day.